his role in all of this is, we should not forget that, like, as a role, as an agent, your role is to try to get the best results out of your client, for
Very
your
fair.
client, and then also try to maintain a good relationship with all the clubs, because you do not only have one player that you manage, you have dozens of them.
Right.
And you want to try to keep a good rapport with everyone. So
let me ask you a question about that
Yeah.
in particular,
Yeah.
before you move forward. And just remember your point, but I want to speak on that. Was it the best choice as an agent to get Carmelo to the team for the most money, or to get Carmelo to a team that would expand his basketball legacy? And if that was the Knicks, wouldn't a good GM with a longer term vision for a player go, listen, you can get there for nothing, that would leave them with assets so that they could build a winning team, and if you win in New York, if you are the catalyst for winning in New York, you will be bigger than any NBA contract could ever be, excuse me. And what is your opinion in terms of an agent doing right by a player? Shouldn't his basketball legacy be on that agent's mind as well?
100%. But we do not know what Carmelo's intention was. I think in order to understand the whole situation, I do remember the situation pretty vividly, because I kept listening to podcasts every single day, and there were reports about the Nets being very aggressive about Carmelo, wanting to pry him away. And I think that for Melo himself and him as a person, I think it was just very important for him to come to New York, come back home, but also get the maximum amount of money.
Right.
And if he talks to Leon Rose and says, listen, Leon, no matter what the cost is, these are my two goals, make it happen, then Rose, he basically doesn't care about anything else. He wants to make it happen. He goes to Jim Dolan. And says, listen, Jim, this is the situation. Melo wants to come to you, but we need to have a clear goal in mind in terms of the contract. The CBA is looming. We need to do this deal now. He comes to you. He's a superstar. You have Amari. You have a great team. And I can guarantee you will reach the playoffs and there will be glory. And this is what Jim Dolan hears from Leon Rose, and this is what he agrees upon. And he doesn't care about draft picks or pick swaps or losing Danilo Gallinari or Timofey Mozgov. He just does – he's just doing the trade.
Right.
And I can understand it from a human perspective, because this is what Melo wanted. This was what was in his heart. He wanted to go to New York immediately. He wanted to right the ship. He wanted to be the hero. And he wanted the maximum amount of money. And as you mentioned already, rightfully so, is the CBA, the new contract was looming. Nobody knew what was happening, not even Leon Rose, because he couldn't forecast how the players in the league would negotiate a new deal. So by hearing from Melo, I want the max money, I want the Big Apple now, he just pulled the trigger, and he did what was best for his client ultimately.
Fair. You know what? I can't even argue that. Myself, I may have my perspective of how I think that should have gone. I personally feel when you put a player in a losing situation, it also puts them in a bad business situation. And
100%.
And I don't think, especially watching how this is ending for Carmelo Anthony, I don't think that he became, or his basketball legacy was enhanced by his earning potential. Matter of fact, I think it almost hurts him, because he's viewed as a guy, as long as I got mine, the rest doesn't matter. And I wonder, and I think maybe for all the future agents out there, I think you need to be thinking about, when you place a player someplace, right? When you put a player on a team, are you looking out for the right now, the check that could be written? Because there's a lot of guys getting paid a lot of money, and they're very unhappy where they are, and their basketball reputations are being hurt. I think you have to have a overarching basketball vision for the player. Now,
You're absolutely right, but I think that's why Melo is so fascinating with his career and as a person. I was never fortunate to really have a conversation with him, but I feel that, like all of us, he made some choices in his career that he might regret at some point, and I think this was one of them. But also, he was at the height of his career. He was a superstar back then,
Right.
and
you feel invincible at that age and at the height of your powers.
He doesn't think about, if we have Gallo and Wilson Chandler still with the team, we will be better. He's like, no, I'm coming. Amari is there. We figure it out because I will carry the team. He was in his prime, and he was determined to turn things around by himself. Mm-hmm. And I think this is also a little bit of a facet of his growing up and the person that he is, that he felt that he always needed to prove that he is the guy and he's the man. And I think that influenced him a little bit in this decision. Doesn't mean that, like, looking back, that he might regret it, and that's revisionist history.
Right.
But I feel that, like, he strongly wanted to have this outcome be true, and all parties involved basically abide, and this is how it happened.
Right. Yeah. And I can agree with that. That is a sound way to look at it. But again, we have, it's hindsight is 2020. So even looking back at it, it's almost unfair. But at the time, that was my take. My take was you want to stack this team. Let's talk a little bit about the selection itself. And even if you don't know a lot about Leon Rose, let's talk about the process first. I for one, do not believe that the results tell Jim Dolan that he has the right to just pick anybody he thinks is best. Right? He does, he does ultimately have that right. But did I lose you? Hold on. And we're back. Sorry for that technical difficulty, but let's flow on. The point we were left off at was, if I'm Dolan, I wouldn't give myself and my grades in picking executives for this team, or even trust myself. I would go out and find people who were smarter than me and make this choice. I would at least basically, interview a few people instead of applying I know what I'm doing. I got this guy. He knows everybody in basketball. I'm just hiring him. What did you think of the process of how the Knicks ended up with their new GM?
Well, everything went very fast, wouldn't you say? I mean, they fired Steve Mills. He remains in the organization in a different capacity, as we know. So he's not really gone. That's what everyone does who is loyal to Dolan. Mm-hmm. And after, again, hearing about Masai Ujiri, as you already mentioned, the process was done pretty quickly. It was before Thursday's trade deadline. Leon Rose basically was announced. Scott Perry retained his job for now. He did one trade, the Marcus Morris one, and the process was through. And it's interesting because I never thought that the Knicks would actually have a chance for Masai Ujiri because he's on the contract. Mm-hmm. And I keep remembering 2 years ago when the Knicks, after firing Phil Jackson, tried to get David Griffin, who was unemployed back like 2 years ago after his Cavaliers job. He came in for an interview. He was interested, but he said to the organization, listen, I need independence. I want to hire my own people. I want to hire my own staff, and I need to do the things that I deem to be correct. If you give this freedom to me, I will be your next president of basketball operations. And upon knowing that Steve Mills will be included in any capacity and he will be part of the team, David Griffin declined. And I just see a repeating behavior with the New York Knicks, with every single new president of basketball operations. Phil Jackson was the guy who was hired through back channels and through, I know somebody,
right,
with the reputation of he is a mastermind. He is somebody who can lure in superstars, who people respect. It's the same song again, Yves, that we're hearing with Leon Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And in effect, it is somebody that, like, where Dolan thinks that the reputation of the franchise will be improved with this person, he thinks that through back channeling and through I know everyone and I'm very well connected, people will come to New York. And in the end, it just shows that nobody in the organization, sadly, does understand how to do the real work that's necessary in order to turn the franchise around and be successful. And I keep remembering one article that Seth Rosenthal, who created Posting and Toasting several years ago, and who's still with SB Nation, he's a brilliant guy. He shared an article that was published on Bloomberg about the New York Knicks hiring a brand agency several weeks ago. Like, it was still in the old year. And it came after the comments of Kevin Durant saying, well, the Knicks are not hype anymore. They're not like the hot thing.
Right.
Not even in the city. It's the Nets, it's the Warriors, it's other teams, because the young fans and the young players grow up with the Knicks as a losing franchise. And I think that this got through Dolan in an even more devastating kind of way than any other criticism that is out there in regards to his resume for the past 20 years. So he is afraid as a businessman to lose a certain business reputation. He is afraid to lose money. So what he does is he's hiring a brand agency. The brand agency is telling him to improve the reputation, and he's doing the hiring of Leon Rose. So again, it feels like he's trying to take the shortcut. He's not prepared to give up power, control, and does what's necessary basically to turn this thing around. So I see it as something that is just another episode of the same show that we're seeing on Broadway for the past 20 years.
Yeah.
And sadly, and I have to say as a disclaimer, as a fan, but also as an independent observer, I came to be more in the camp of as long as he is in charge, nothing will change, rather than being a person who says, I try to look at every move very objectively and independently, which is obviously a subjective point of view from my part, so nobody has to believe what I'm saying or agrees with me, but this is something that I see and is like a repeating tone of the New York Knicks and Jim Dolan as the chairman of this organization.
Yeah, and it's this same circle of people, right? It's,
exactly.
It's, he listens to Irving Azoff, the ex-Live Nation CEO that's been out because, that's one of the people he admires and he looks up to. That's someone who's done business with him from just live shows at Madison Square Garden. But you have to understand Dolan, and you have to understand his neuroses to understand what's wrong with the Knicks. Dolan is a person who was born into billions of dollars. He wasn't very smart. When you're born with billions of dollars and you end up at a SUNY school, and don't get me wrong, SUNY schools are excellent. There's a few state schools, State University of New York schools that rank very highly academically. But if you're the child of a billionaire and you end up at a SUNY upstate, that's a red flag of, something is not 100% right there. Because his father could have just paid his way into any school. We see that with